was saying, I mean, I always find these stories very interesting about how graffiti art and culture migrated into Europe, especially Italy is of interest to me as well. And so we're gonna dive into that, into a little bit of that story, but also you guys as friends, as a collective who actually developed as co-conspirators in graffiti, but also as a design studio, a collective, like a brain trust of ideas, let's just say. So what I'm going to do first is kind of just very briefly set this up so I can read a bit of the resume for folks, and then we'll just jump right in to tell your story. So
my resume is being done by Merit 139. This is kind of surreal, but let me just enjoy the moment. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Well, Truly Design crew coming to us live from Torino, Italy. That's Mauro 149, Rems 182, and Ninja 1, who collectively are known as Truly Design. They're a graffiti design based design firm that was born from the practice and love of the art form. Their commitment to constant research for new forms of visual language enabled the collective to progress technically and experimentally through the years. Progressively, each detached more from the classic graffiti aesthetic criterions and street art as well to approach and focus on the practice of anamorphic art, bringing the optical experimentations of the Renaissance and Baroque epoch to settings within industrial archaeology in Turin. And of course, as an agency, you guys have had success with Amazon, Spotify, Adidas, Jeep, Facebook, Adobe, Samsung, and many others. And so with that brief introduction, we'll get more into that. But what I want to know and start with a bit about all of you. And so I guess since the crew is there, maybe they want to say hello.
Guys, come and say hi. Come and say hi. Come on. It's gonna be me doing all the, you know, boring talking and stuff, but hi, Carlos. This is the crew. Woo.
What's up?
Ciao.
Yeah.
What's up, Carlos?
Okay, so introduce yourselves.
I'm Ninja 1, Emiliano.
Ninja.
Yeah, my name is Mauro. That's my legal tag. I'm not gonna say the rest.
I'm Rems 182.
There you go. So
Yeah,
guys, you know, it's fascinating because not only you guys childhood friends, you are business partners, but your real business started on the streets and on the trains. So I want to explore that with you as to, you know, how and when this phenomena came to your attention that is known as graffiti art.
Oh, dude. I mean, that's like, I mean, well, it was like 90, 95, 96, 97. 96. Yeah, more or less in that period. I mean, we're all like between 13 and 15, and you know, what happened back then was you saw cool things, you did cool things, not really knowing what that stuff originated from. You know, you kind of saw it in throughout the city, and you know, we saw tags and we saw, you know, bombs and stuff, and we had, you know, when you're 15 and you don't have internet and all you have is like, you know, the streets, you talk to friends, and within, you know, a couple dozen conversations you find out that that cool thing that you saw round the corner isn't something that the kid round the corner made up. It's something that comes, you know, people from Milan are doing it. Okay, cool. So where does that come from? Turns out, you know, people in Rome are doing it as well. Awesome. Okay, so where does that come from? And you know the story. I don't have to tell it, I mean, to you of all people. So
well, if I could interject for a second, right? Because you're learning, you know, kind of provincially, right, about this culture.
Definitely.
And did you guys think that was a phenomena that Italians were creating, or did you figure out that it was coming from the United States?
No, I mean, when you bump into something that's so that has a construction of its own, that has, you know, like a physical and kind of like you know, a juvenile construct, something that has a mood of its own, you know that it wasn't someone around the corner to just invent this stuff. It did have to have a more profound, a deeper history to it. And that's why, you know, when in the 90s, we weren't in the Middle Ages. That's not what I was saying when I said, you know, there was no internet, but we did have, you know, magazines and stuff. We did have films. We did have stuff. I mean, a curiosity. It took us some time to find out that actually this thing that we were incredibly attracted to had like a almost 30-year history. And that was like crazy. I mean, we're like, in 95, we thought we had discovered something, you know, kind of new and underground. And we're like, okay, wait a second. But, you know, in the States, this thing has been going on for like, you know, much, much more than my own lifespan. So that really took a hit on us. I mean, it was amazing to learn that something that we were just attracted by in a very spontaneous way, and that we started doing in a very spontaneous way without ever having to learn all the history, did have a history. And when we learned that history, it just, you know, it really fucked up our minds even more. We had to learn more and had to do more, and it just grew and grew and grew. And I don't know, I haven't been able to stop it ever since. That's
right. And what's interesting to me is that because, you know, the first generation of a kind of not first generation, but yeah, but some were first generation, like Faze and others, Lee, they started showing in Italy early on in the early 80s.
Dude, I saw a piece like from 1984 by Phase 2, and it's about 120 kilometers from where I live. And I saw it for the first time last year. Okay, I had no idea that Phase 2 had come to my country in 84. I mean, I knew that he had traveled to and fro, but I had no idea that he came to this very, very little town where these, you know, famous writers from nowadays who back then were like teens, but they had invited these guys from like New York to come all the way, you know, Ramsey and whatnot. And this thing had taken place in 1984. The more you learn, and you know, the more you find out that these connections, which nowadays seem natural because you just log onto the internet and you find out what people have been doing all around, you know, the world in no time. Back then, it was just like, you know, pen pal thing and magazines and just people talking to one another. And even back then, it was so intense, and it was something that spread like wildfire.
If I can interject, because Jazz Crystal says VHS, because VHS was the film format. One of the things that was also interesting is that Phase 2 had such a strong affinity for Italy. So did Toxic, which, you know, who I actually ran into out there once. So now, of course, as you guys start maturing, and tell me about the early writing scene in terms of how you guys started moving from walls to the trains in Italy, but then to the greater part of Europe.
Well, you know, once you're attracted to the phenomenon, you learn how it was born. You know, from the simple tag to, you know, making that tag bigger and flashier and whatnot. And what's the best way to have that tag move? It's a train. And once you step into the yard, there's really no way of erasing that experience from your mind. I mean, I haven't been actively train bombing for about 10 years or something more, but it's still something I dream at least once or twice a week, at least, because it's such a strong experience that I can't get it out of my head. And it's something that's that teaches you a lot. I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's a trend and whatnot. It's an art form, but it's something that teaches you how to stick together as a group, how to watch your back for one another, and it teaches you to do the best that you can in very little time. And yeah, I mean, I think I've learned more from illegal bombing that I could ever learn in, you know, any kind of art school, because you learn techniques and whatnot, but it's a spirit of adaptation, of, you know, time.
But
Friendship.
adaptation, but let's talk about the risks, right? Because when you think about the risk, I mean, look at you guys squeezing in between trains here, and this is, you know, just the image is pretty incredible. Look how narrow that is, and what if that train moves, right? So the risk reward is an issue, and legality. What were you guys? What guys were you facing? What kind of issues were you facing with police and society early on, with the movement in Italy?
I gotta tell you the truth. I mean, if you know where you're going and you're not running any huge risks, I think it's much easier than doing, like, you know, the New York City subway, okay, painting trains in Italy. I gotta tell you the truth. But if you're still, sometimes if you choose, you know, riskier situations because that's what you're closest to, the thing is, you always find yourself in a place where you're asking yourself, what am I doing here? Who is making me do this? Why am I doing this? Okay, and it's only yourself who's to blame. And I think that's all the better, because you've taken that huge risk of, you know, being arrested and going through all the nuisance, which is probably better than in Germany, better than the United States, but, you know, worse than many other places in the world. But still, it's something that you have no rational intention, no rational end, which can, you know, bring you much more than what you put into it. Okay, you put in a lot of risk, you put in a lot of energy, and what do you get it at the very most? People seeing your train, maybe 4 or 5 people if it gets buffed the next day, something more if it gets buffed in a couple of weeks. But, you know, you do it for the adventure. I mean, people have been the train system has been buffing trains here for about 20 years, pretty much constantly. So if a piece runs, you know, 2 or 3 months, that's already, you know, you're lucky to have your piece out 2 or 3 months. But you're still taking that risk, and you're doing it, and you're always asking yourself, you know, what led me here? You know, this is a dangerous situation, but I love it, and I'm doing it not only because it's fun, but because, you know, the day after I get to see what I've painted, check out if it's crap or not, and you know, I'm telling it to you. It's obvious, of course, to you, but it's something that if you haven't lived it, it seems kind of stupid. You know, why are you risking your life getting run over by a train? I don't know. You got to do it, man. That's the bottom answer I have to give up. You know, it's
one of the things I found really interesting, as irreverent as graffiti is to society, when I was in Europe in the early days, and when I went to Milan and saw so much of it, even throughout Europe, on in these old historic towns, in these buildings, these churches, it was just relentless. It really didn't have the kind of romantic relationship between architecture that and the public space that it has now. And, you know, what is it about that? About, like, well, I don't care if this church is from the 14th century. I'm going to put a tag on it.
Dude, I mean, if you go to Pompeii, okay, Pompeii, the city that was, you know, that has like had ashes all over for 2,000 years and was dug up like a few dozen years ago. You can find graffiti from those times with people like writing political messages and, you know, writing their own names and stuff. People have been doing it like forever. And if you go to, like, I don't know, the Duomo of Firenze, you walk inside and you walk like up those staircases and you see the names scrawled on the walls. Of course, there's some people from like the day before yesterday, but some people from the 1800s, from the 1700s. People have been writing their names all along, all the time, everywhere, like all the time. It's been going on for like millennia, not centuries, not centuries. So probably I mean, there is, personally, I would never ever write on a historical building. That's because I don't find my tag to be like part of that. It's not embellishing it. It's not making it any prettier. I don't want my tag on that building. But the attitude of people, you can't define graffiti as like something with a unique intention. There's people who have been like writing on things for centuries, and it's like spasmodic. It's like something people don't even think about. Even in historical settings. I mean, you were born in a city and it's been like that for like forever. You have a 500-year-old building. Maybe you coming from the States would look at it like saying like, dude, there's like nothing that's as old as that in my town. But for me, it's normal. It's like I get out of my house and I see that, and maybe I'll just tag it, But the bottom line is that graffiti has something that goes beyond graffiti. Graffiti as we know it, urban graffiti, metro, writing your name has something that goes beyond that. I think goes way beyond, way before
I
graffiti.
You bring up a good point, right? As we're looking at this train, right? This I guess this is whose train is this?
Someone I know. Probably.
So right.
Yeah, that was me about 10 years ago. Yeah.
So as we think about the uniqueness of, the act of writing on something is nothing new. And as we know it and talk about like graffito or graphene and graffito from Italy, so to speak, that while that's kind of not new, what's interesting for me was I thought the trains were our innovation, and that was something that we brought to art in the public space. And in fact, it's not, and it actually goes back. I always make this reference for folks that if you research the Russians, the agitprop movement, you'll see as far back as 1913, they were painting boxcar, whole car, top to bottoms with characters and letters. Again, and that's propaganda and whatnot, but that is what a piece of evidence, right? That gets lost in all of this.
Yeah, dude, I mean, I can find you propaganda, again, dating back to the ancient Roman times. Writing letters, like block letters with, names and politicians and stuff. That's been going on for thousands of years. But doing it as it was done in New York, from the late 60s onwards, and Philly, whatnot, if it was happening in those years. This kind of writing, your name for the sake of your own name, and for the sake of doing it, and to, build yourself an identity, and to and to really, I mean, think about it. It's feeling cool, feeling as if you made your mark, that kind of stuff. People have been doing it all along, but never so big, never so colorful, never so, I don't know, never with so much panic while you're doing it.
Also, never with so much collusion, right? Because the collusion is not just local, it's worldwide. And here we see you guys come to New York City. What was that like for you coming to Mecca and finally coming face to face with some of the artists of the culture? Did you come here, did you paint trains, or did you just paint walls?
Okay, to tell you the truth, the photo that's on right now, that's when Cope came to Italy. Okay, so that was a few years before we came to New York, but we did that anyhow. That time we went, okay, that was when we went to New York. And
This is your legendary Stay High 149, rest in peace, voice of the ghetto.
Dude, I mean, my tag is Mauro 149. That has nothing to do, of course, with the street I was born in, because I wasn't born in New York. That's my date of birth. And I found out later on that there was this guy, you know, from the 70s, and his tag was Stay High 149. And I met him in New York when we were at the Meeting of Styles. And I was like, okay, so I gotta tell him, dude, I mean, my tag is my first name, my legal tag is my first name followed by 149, but that has nothing to do with my address. That's just blah, 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 blah. Are you okay with that? And he was like, of course, man. I mean, it's your date of birth. It has nothing to do. Of course, I love that. And I took that picture, and of course, that picture is me before I started crying, and and I mean back then, and when we met Coke,
why is it so emotional? Explain that to me. What are the emotional ties?
I think that when you're doing something that's so profound and that's so motivated by your own enthusiasm, creativity, and I don't know what else I can add to that, probably nothing, but if you're doing it with the same intent as someone who was making up that thing like 30 years back, and you're doing it with that same spirit, with that same excitement, I don't think there's a deeper connection than that. I mean, and this guy was like 60 years old when I met him, and I was half his age, and I really felt humbled by the fact that Stay High 149 took a picture with me, and I have this poster like framed at my place. It's like right in the middle of my house, and has his tag with the dedication with my name on it. And
So
I can die a happy man right now.
So if Stay High is, you know, that much to us here, who in Italy would be the equivalent? Like, who are the pioneers? Who in Italy could you name that are the pioneers of writing culture?
Okay, I mean, the very first pioneers in Italy, I gotta say the truth, were people who tagged and maybe discontinued after a few years. So it was something more related to the posse rap culture. Among the people that we first actually copied, I'm gonna say copied because it's not like emulating or something. It is like they're our idols. We copied them, and they were like the kings back then. It was probably, I mean, the K&M crew from Tuscany, Blef from Genova, Mr. Wayne, and the VDS crew from Milano. And I got like a few dozen more out there, but I think those are the names that I'm gonna stick to, because personally those were the guys that I copied the most. And you know, back then, I mean, even in our city, there was the TOT crew, Top of Torino. And that was amazing, because back then we were 15 and we had these people like who were already doing whole cars and trains and bombings and whatnot. And we were like little kids and looking up to them and saying, you know, dude, these guys are like, you know, the original shit from where we're from. I mean, they managed to do something that has somehow made its way across the ocean and has been so intense and so exciting as to inspire and spawn so much and so violently and so relentlessly, like all over the globe, this thing that I still can't get rid of. I mean, it's my job, and I've been painting legal walls and whatnot for so many years, but I can't get it out of my head. I gotta paint steel every once in a while, you know, otherwise I'm not doing very well.
And again, you know, there's a transition from steel to walls to murals. And in your pilgrimage back to New York, you guys came and painted at the infamous 5 Points. What was that experience like for you guys?
I'm not a religious guy, so I'm not gonna say it's like going to the Mecca, but it was like going to the Mecca, man. That's all I can say. I mean, it's like it's been 20 years since you've been reading about stuff that was painted there and dreaming of going to New York City. The first time you go there, you get to paint. What else more could I ask of, you know? It was cool.
And so now, you know, again, by this point, you guys as a crew, I see 4 of you. Were you originally 4 as a crew or 3?
It was 4 of us. It was 4 of us. And one of us has decided to follow his own trajectory in graph. But still, you know, we were born as a 4-man team. The very first experiences was a 4-man team. Probably we would have gotten arrested a few more times if it was just, you know, 1 man less than that. But I think watching out for one another is a very important thing. So the more people you are in a crew, the better the outcomes in that field.
So when you guys are starting to move on from, I guess, adolescence into teens and thinking about going from high school to university, and already in the game of art and painting, did you or any of the other guys have, and this is kind of interesting, I kind of know the answer a little bit, but I want to hear it from you as to what your trajectory was, you know, like in university, were you going to art school? What professions were you chasing once you started getting older?
Oh, sure. Well, oh, dude, that's a huge question, because I think we were, in those years, we were a lot, you know, inclined to the adventure and whatever it would have brought with the years. And our parents were very, very worried about what we would have done with our lives. But we chose to study art, and we, each one of us chose to study a different, you know, trajectory. That's why we're so, as of nowadays, we have, our spectrum is so wide. There's one of us, Emanuele, Rems 182. He's actually a classical artist. He's a painter. He studied at the Fine Art Academy, okay? He can do like an oil painting like in the 1600s, okay? That's what he studied. That was his everyday, you know, stuff. That's what he learned to do. So whilst he was studying that stuff, he said, okay, let's try to do that like in a larger format, and, you know, use rollers instead of brushes, and try using those fat caps instead of, you know, those other brushes and whatnot. I studied illustration. I started using the computer a little bit, so that was interesting to see how some digital effects could have been like moved onto a wall, and experiment technically with what could have happened with that.
Right.
But again, we just an adventure.
Yeah, we sort of start seeing it in this mural here, right? We see kind of like the vector graphics style.
There you go.
And again, the arrow is the signifier, right? And so this is part of that transition. I know you had mentioned one of you studied law.
Yeah, that's Emiliano. He was, I was going to mention him next, because he's the reason why I'm not in the pen. And also he's the one who
Wait, did you ever have to use him to get you out of legal trouble for graffiti?
Not personally, no.
That would be so amazing. A graffiti lawyer getting another graffiti writer off.
No, that wouldn't be very credible. But, you know, I mean, aside illegal graffiti, which I have to admit we were very, very lucky in. But apart from that, now that we're actually a company, I mean, his mindset is what really keeps the whole thing 100% conscious, 100% legit, 100%. I mean, not that we would do anything illegal, but, you know, everything is, any kind of economic activity is governed by laws. And if you can abide by those laws and go to bed at night and sleep well, whereas you've been doing illegal graffiti for like 15 years, but with your job, you're like legit and whatnot. I know that doesn't make much sense, but, you know, as far as our job is concerned, we really had everything pretty much in focus, legally speaking.
Right. And what's interesting is, as you know, with these early murals, you see a transition, right? In terms of, you know, the graphic design, you know, the mural design, the execution, the logo, again, putting Truly Design out, not just as a crew, but as an entity, right? Because you see the trademark logo. By this point, it seems to me that you guys are decidedly a design studio.
We're a crew and then a design studio. If we had never been a crew, I think that, I mean, no kind of commercial bond would have stuck, would have, you know, lasted so long as something that was born between people who are doing very illegal stuff and very stupid stuff, because, you know, you're just running them on train tracks and doing stupid shit. But once it gets a little more serious, I'm gonna air quote this very close. Once you do something that's, you know, upgrading it a couple of notches, the sticking out for one another, the, you know, being true friends in whatever kind of situation. Once we viewed it as just simplifying the whole thing. So you take away all the illegal side and take away everything that can be, you know, an interference from the outside, from the law. Now that we're doing something legit and we're friends and we had to stick up for one another when things were you know, done illegally, you know, what can stand between us? Very little, in my opinion. I mean,
right. And one of the things, you know, one of the things that I find, and, you know, there's some, right, again, people play both sides of this fence and some don't agree. But early on, with the early graffiti design studios, whether it was the drawing board with Say Adams, or me and Kel with Mirame Media and Voice of the Ghetto Productions, and Hayes Studios, the guys who were interested in communication design and design were aware of that there had to be something of a safer space, but also a viable space for, you know, us commercially as well. And also, more importantly, that it was a way to utilize our talents for income, right? For survival. And also at the same time, advance the culture, advance the art, right? Because the success of a writer doing a big campaign, for instance, is kind of when you start seeing that campaign everywhere, and you may not see the tag, so to speak, but that writer is getting up big time, right?
Sure.
And so what I imagine is that the murals and the projects you get, that maybe underlying that, right? Even if they remove themselves from graffiti, you guys are getting up.
Yeah, there's a huge parallel between graffiti as we learned it, you know, as kids, by having fun and whatnot, and something called advertising, which has been going on a very, very intense level for at least, let's say, 150 years, to play it safe, if not more. So, you know, branding and anything connected to that concept, if you really think about it, take away all the illegal distinction, it has almost everything in common, one with the other. You know, it's like developing a name, developing a style, developing something that has, you know, character in and of itself. And that's what we found out as we were doing it. I mean, we were kids, we were so completely naive of this thing, that as we continued to do graffiti and we continued to look around and, you know, see all the advertising, all the other shit, we were realizing, hold up, this really does have something, you know, of both parts. One is completely, is something you do, you know, without being asked. You know, it's just graffiti. It's getting your name up. And the other part has a lot of backing up, and it has a lot of intention, and it has a lot, you know, to gain. And, you know, putting the two things together kind of came natural at one point, because there's a lot that's in common between branding and graffiti. It's just very different languages, because it's not aimed at graffiti writers from graffiti writers. It's aimed at, you know, more or less everyone. So
Right.
if you've learned to communicate within a certain clique.
But let's be clear about it too. There's also financial gain, right? There's also the opportunity of being engaged in an industry, and also to be able to bring new ideas to the table that are not seen by those who come out of a kind of a structured system like university and then the ad agency world, right? That there's something that it's more value added when graffiti writers take to this space. And one of the things that you guys did that I thought was very interesting was get into the anamorphic, forgive me if I'm saying it wrong, anamorphic.
Dude, it's a tongue twister. Don't ask me to say it.
Yeah, so these are wonderful, right? And I was mentioning to you earlier that the first anamorphic installation I had seen was up in the Bronx in the 80s, in a school auditorium, and they did the thing. I forget the name of the artist, so forgive me, but it was part of the Fashion Motor program, and so the idea of rethinking what you see visually. And against a structure. And this is what's interesting about painting trains, right? That trains in their way, you're painting on this industrial surface that's not completely flat, right? And even though it's subtle, it's not that dramatic in the same way a wall, or particularly this installation is, that there's always a sleight of eye that comes with graffiti writing, whether you're dropping shadows or 3Ds or faceting letters and things like that. So it's already kind of built in, right? And so this transition for you guys of taking on these projects and looking at it from a kind of a classical thesis, right? That's built into early Renaissance paintings, and I'm curious as to how you decided, or when you decided, okay, this is a studio direction.
I think it stems from the very first part of your question, which was, you know, any agency wouldn't just start doing stuff that's so crazy and experimental. Because, you know, if it's your job and you've studied it in a very classical way, there are certain paths and certain, let's say, ideas that have been going on for some years, and which can be found in textbooks and whatnot. When you're pursuing things from an artistic point of view, which is, by the way, I never said this in this interview before, but we all were born with a passion for drawing ever since we were kids. Okay, so finding graffiti was really like, I don't know, throwing like the fuel into the fire, okay, at the very last. It was something that just lit the whole thing aflame, and from then, starting to experiment took on a whole other level. You know, when you're doing stuff in your own room, it's one thing. When you find that there's walls, that there's trains, that there's abandoned factories and whatnot, you start doing things on a hugely different level. And when you start experimenting with that stuff, you start throwing in everything cool that you see, you know, everything that goes in from logo design. Let's start simplifying. You know, you've been doing wild styles all this time. Let's start simplifying our logo and making it a little more readable. You know, let's see where that leads to. And you're just doing it for fun, okay, not for commercial intents or whatnot.
Let me get you to pause there for a second. Let me get you to pause there for a second, because in these slides that we're looking at, right, where if we come here, it's kind of the Medusa, right?
Sure.
Straight on, right? And this is an anamorphic painting, right?
Yeah.
And was this an abandoned space or a commissioned space?
It was an abandoned space, which was taken over by like a collective of artists who decided that, you know, before that place was to be taken down, that it, you know, we had to paint it, okay? And so they were like, okay, you guys, it's gonna be here for like 2-3 months. Who cares? It's gonna be here. So you want to try out something cool? You're welcome, okay? So let's go. It was like an abandoned factory, as you can see from this flick. It was then like just completely demolished. But that was a space that we needed to try out something really crazy. We'd seen this stuff, and this stuff was,
right.
I'm not going to do a history lesson. I'm not going to do a history lesson. It was like from 500 years ago, and the main objective was to create an illusion of spaces which weren't actually there. Like, you know, we had these domes, and you didn't have money to build a dome, and you had to build, like, paint something to make it seem that there was a dome in a church. And so that was how anamorphic painting was conceived.
Right. And my question to you is, I wanted you to expand a little, like when you do these works and put so much effort into these abandoned spaces and they get destroyed. And again, this is a sentiment that's unique to graffiti writers, that the understanding how ephemeral the work is, that it's here for X amount of time and that's it, despite the labor and thought put into it, that they would no longer live. Like, for instance, I look at this was such a great installation, and it's just like, another great piece lost, right? Do you feel the weight of its loss, or you just accept that?
Dude, can I throw the question back to you? I mean, when you used to paint trains back in the day and you weren't sure how long they would last, if someone would paint over them and stuff, why did you keep painting them? I think the answer is the same. I'm not expecting anything. Just please answer me how you would think would be correct.
Well, that's the rules of engagement, right? On the streets, number one. And yes, there is a bit of the loss that you feel like, fuck, if I didn't get a picture, I didn't get a picture, I didn't get seen. But also the acceptance is that, well, I'll come back and do it again, or I'll do it bigger and I'll do more of them. And so it's kind of that relentless attitude. But again, that's subway writing, which again, it has its own set of rules, which are different to public art, right? To mural art. But what's interesting, right? I'm talking about the loss of something, but you guys managed to parlay that into public space, into commercial space, which is really cool.
Sure.
So you have clients that have bought into this concept.
As long as public art goes, thank you for answering me. That was a brilliant answer. That was just exactly what I had in mind. But of course, if you can convey the experience and tell it, and make some kind of documentation and portray your work and communicate it, it has a whole other value. It's not something that you're doing just for fun. You're doing it for fun, of course, because I mean, my job is what I love and whatnot. But you're creating documentation. You're trying to pay attention to those details which you take for granted when you're doing it for pleasure. And so you're telling a story, okay? You're actually giving it maybe a little more meaning than something that can be conceived and painted and erased in the course of a month. It's lasting a little longer. It's site specific. That's what it means to us. A lot of our, I mean, actually all of our work is site specific. It always comes from where are we painting it?
Yeah, pause for a second, because I want to ask you about the story, right? Because the story, for you guys as artists, which is probably the most unique part of it, is that you guys were graffiti writers, right? You come from graffiti. Now, as professionals, how much of that story where is that in terms of the story? Has it been pushed back, or is it out of the story? or does it go hand in hand with who you are as an agency and as artists?
There is absolutely no way of setting the graffiti part aside as, you know, just a pretty frame of what we've been doing. And there would be no meaning to doing that, because the spirit of what we do, of, you know, pushing our own limits, of adapting to whatever kind of surface we will find. You know, is it a client? Is it that I'm just, you know, walking into the park and seeing a nice wall, has a few windows and whatnot? I'll just work around those and paint something for my own pleasure. But if it's done for a client, maybe there is the added challenge of purveying a message, of, you know, conveying and communicating something that is not only thought by us as a collective, but that's just a further challenge of what we have already been doing all these years. You know, you find a wall, is that wall U-shaped? Does it have an indent? Does it have a wall? Does it have a door? Does it have, you know, a nasty corner which you don't want to paint? Who cares? Let's find a way to do something cool with this wall. That's the main attitude. When you ask me to do that, and it's my job, and you add the fact that I have to communicate something that isn't my, you know, I don't know, my gut feeling about life and my philosophical view about the world, you know, it's just another challenge. I can do that. That's cool. That's what I've studied all my life, because I've studied art, I've studied communication, and I didn't do it because I wanted to find a job, because that would have made my parents much, much happier. They were desperate when I was studying art to find a job, and they were very realistic about that. So if I did all that stuff, it's because I have a passion for what I do, and not because I want to be a billionaire and whatnot. It's just something that I found to be easy thanks to graffiti. And there's no other way that I can make this clear, dude.
Yeah. So it's identity, right? It's you found identity and married it to purpose.
Yes, and it's a form of expression which really doesn't need much, how can I say, encouragement. It just is it's just self-generating. It's something that you do, and you want to do even more, and you want to do even more, and it just pushes your boundaries so much, because it's public art, it's art history. I mean, where we grew up in Italy with all, you know, the artistic culture and whatnot, with the advertising, and with all the, you know, the very many waves of art and communication.
So let me hold you here for a second, because
I'm sorry,
you said a couple things, right? And part of that is adapting to circumstantial space events and spaces that require something new and different, right? And again, then there's that relationship with you guys and doing these anamorphic paintings for your clients that require a different kind of thinking about architectural space, and also to, beside the sleight of eye, that you sort of by design inject some things that are kind of historically notable if you're an art nerd, right? That you'll relate to, like,
thank you for calling us that.
The suprematists, right? The constructivists. These things I see tied into things like this, as well as those principles that you mentioned about classical painting. Now, I mean, there is an added bonus to that, isn't there? That you merge so much consciously and unconsciously into these works.
Yeah, that's a cool thing, because you never really get the feeling that there's a limit to what you can do. But that's also a bad thing, because sometimes you want to push that limit a little too much compared to what the potential is. And so you're, at the end, you know, you start with a huge idea and you have to kind of downsize it, you know? And everyone's saying, wow, that's cool, that's cool. And you're like, dude, I would have pushed that a little further, but don't worry, that's going to happen next time. And, you know, that's what, again, graffiti has taught us. Okay, you're not going to do a whole car next time. You're going to do it top to bottom and say you're satisfied. Okay, maybe the time after that, you might try a whole car and you might be satisfied with that. So you're never pushing too much, because we've been through that. You know, if you try to push too much, you're overdoing shit, and you know, you're just maybe, I don't know, overestimating what you can do at any given moment, but taking it one step at a time. Also in relation to what your surroundings are and to what you can do. You know, we've been throwing in mirrors and, you know, glass and whatnot into our compositions. Sometimes we want to throw all that in together.
Tell me about this one. Tell me about the one we're looking at the moment.
Okay. Now to illustrate that, the orange part, which is like the upper part, if you can perceive that there's like a handrail which divides, there's actually a staircase running up those, that was in a museum. So it was like a handrail going along those two walls.
Right.
Yeah, there you go. So basically we inverted. The inside structure is on the handrail, so on the outside part of the wall. And the orange part, which is the coated part, is actually on the inside of the handrail. So it's like on the wall, which you would actually walk next to as you're going up the stairs. So we kind of inverted that. So if you're walking up and down the stairs, you just see a head sticking up in the middle of the coated orange part. And you're like, dude, I mean, shouldn't it be reversed? So you're playing with space, and this is actually, this is from some time ago. I still like the interaction, but there's a lot more that I would put now.
So what is she, if she's looking up, is there a constructed part?
There's nothing. No, it's nothing. She's standing on a PVC sticker, which is like emulating the shadow of that shape, which is actually completely painted on those 1, 2, 3, 4 surfaces that you see.
Yeah.
You see the corner right in the middle, right? That's all.
It's an optical illusion.
It's an optical illusion. Nothing of that is nothing is real in that. It's just
right.
paint.
You know what I find interesting, because that just triggered you know, what's been happening with some of the style writers like Odieth, right? Are you familiar with him?
Yeah, dude. I mean, he's a master.
Right?
He's a true master, dude.
Yeah, he's doing fantastic work. It's just a slide of the eye.
Absolutely.
And again, this is another view of this, which kind of clarifies what you were saying, that it's a staircase going up. And it really looks, again, it at first fooled me. I thought this was an actual construction. And so it's terrific that you guys are employing this kind of technique in the way that you are, and it really quite interesting how, in particularly this piece, right, this whole kind of classical style interior that gets you know, that the whiteness gets preempted by this color, you know, not just color up in front, in spaces.
Well, dude, that's the cool thing about having, you know, very, very old buildings in your hometown. This is an airport. This is an airport. So that would be, you know, the finger. Yeah, that's, you can see it from.
Is this still in place?
Yeah, that's at the Rome airport. I don't remember the number of the gate. Dude, do you remember the number of the gate? I have no idea. It's one of the gates at the Rome airport. So if you walk out of the plane and you like enter the airport, you see the Vitruvian Man from none other than Maestro Leonardo da Vinci. So yeah.
This is fantastic. I really like this. And again, you know, you take on commercial projects, big projects, as an agency, in terms of your trajectory and your growth, And, you know, I don't know, what can you tell me or tell viewers who may be interested in the business of taking their graffiti and their talents toward the commercial space?
Oh, that's a very hard question, man. Because in the end, if I have to say what led us to pursue our career, it wasn't something that we set forth 15 years ago. If you would have told me 15 years ago that this would have been my job, I would have laughed in your face, honestly, honestly. But it was without the shadow of a doubt, having never invested in any kind of, I don't know, marketing or whatnot could have been available 15 years ago. It was something that started out as we were painting in the streets. People came up to us and said, dude, that looks kind of cool. You want to try doing, you know, my restaurant or my club or my house or whatnot. And, you know, one thing led to another, and this is what we ended up doing. But again, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would never have imagined that this would have been what I am doing right now.
And
Okay, so
there's a bit of irony in all this, right?
there's
And
only irony, dude. Only irony, because in my mind, I would have been, you know, like an illustrator working on paper.
yeah,
What I
yeah.
would have done.
And you know, the irony I speak of is that all roads and train tracks lead you back to New York, right? Not with your graffiti per se, but with this other skill, right? Of doing these anamorphic installations. And here
Yeah.
you are, you know, doing this installation of David Bowie, as Parliament calls him Bowie, but it's David Bowie. And so to me, I found great pleasure in this, right? Because of those of us who were able to do campaigns in the New York subway, that there's something subversive about it, right? About all that grief that came along with graffiti on the trains and in subway stations, that here we are sort of legitimized. But, you know, to quote Jay-Z, we came up right from under you. And here we are, like, getting up.
Nice one.
And you have something that is highly visible. And how did you get this project? How did this come about for you?
It actually got to us, man. I mean, that's what I was saying before. Spotify was looking for someone who was able to do something like this in no time, and, you know, just come up with the right kind of image, you know, the right perspective and whatnot. And we had like 5 hours to assemble all this. Of course, this isn't painted. This is, you know, printed and assembled. And I had to like go to New York and assist, you know, like the workers putting up all the vinyl. And fortunately, yo hablo un poquito español, and so I was actually like able to talk with him directly without, you know, like the middleman who's trying to say stuff. And it was cool because it was like done in no time, and these guys just stuck it up, and it was perfect. And we had printed every single piece like according to our measurements, and that was amazing. But, you know, that was a few years after we went to New York in the first place. But going back to your, you know, your first observation, yes, this is only thanks to graffiti and New York graffiti and what that adventure taught us. Because if it had never been, you know, if we never did that, I think that we would still be painting in our cellars.
And picking your nose.
Absolutely, picking our nose, like right over there. Yes. That's what yeah, definitely, man. I mean, I have absolutely no doubt in saying this. I love drawing, and I've drawn all.
Uh, bad connection. Let's see if you come back on.
My graffiti crew, okay? And I don't know. I don't think I'm telling you anything new because I mean I think your experience has a lot, much more to tell than ours, but it does have a central, you know.
Well,
seed.
no, I mean you know what's important here, right? It's everyone has a unique challenge and story and experience through this, right? And that in many ways, yourself like myself, we're channeling others, right? We're standing on the shoulder of giants, but in giants in many spaces, whether it's graffiti, whether it's advertising, whether it's painting, architecture, and so on, right? And that kind of leads us to where we are now, right? And kind of a place where where once perhaps we felt delegitimized, we are legitimizing ourselves, right? And institutionalizing ourselves and creating agency for ourselves. And I don't mean agency as an advertising agency, I mean agency as opportunity.
Sure.
And having the right to claim space, right? And to claim a piece of the creative economy. And I like that. And again, you know, it's interesting because I think the culture itself is and I always say this, that one, we can't all be legitimate and shouldn't be all like kind of cleaned up and in the studio and in the art world and stuff like that. I don't buy that shit, you know. Like I think there's a place for vandalism, for the bombers, for the taggers. And what they become, who knows? It doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is the act, right? And the right. And again, one can debate that right, because if it's your property or whatever, or you have a creative critique about it, it doesn't matter. The culture will continue to thrive as it has and as it must. Those of us who are older, those of us who kind of survived it, and those who thrive in it are fortunate, but also we have to do our part to lead by example, right? And this is why I was asking you before about like, well, what's the advice you give somebody young trying to figure out their space or their talent after graffiti, so to speak, right? And what we do with the talks, and this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because we've been, it's been years since we've talked, but I was really fascinated about how you guys kind of flipped the script and became a proper design studio. And, you know, by no means are you guys alone in this. This is something I see time and time again in various countries. And I love that, right? Because I've also come out of the ad world here in New York, the agency world. And there's something that's just so like not us about that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? But we're capable.
But it is.
Yes and no, right? Because we're not bureaucratic in the same way.
No,
right?
no. It's much more of a gut feeling. I mean, what maybe it takes some people years to study and realize is something that you have as an attitude. I think that's the main difference between, you know, a formal agency and someone who's done graffiti is something that you don't really need much encouragement or much, you know, pushing to do. I mean, it's just an attitude. I mean, it really also depends on what part of the world you're from. I mean, your background and my background are so completely different, but I do notice that there's very much in common between what pushed you guys without any fanzines, without any, you know, back culture and graffiti and whatnot to just start this whole thing, and us to just take a cue and develop something that is, you know, completely different, because we in Europe, in our cities, we're not just, you know, we're not kids from the ghetto. I mean, not all of us, very few of us share your same cultural and social background, but the kind of communication that that just took a cue from what you guys did, became something that just flourished in an uncontrollable way all over the world. And that's what I find fascinating. I mean, what happened over the past 30 years has been like a constant, oh my God, what are these guys doing here? I mean, what has that turned into? And, you know, it does cross paths of, you know, legit, not legit, illegal. But I think the best kind of advice I could ever give to someone doing graffiti and saying, you know, I want to make a living out of it, is not put that as your end. Is put, you know, your passion towards what you're doing and your hunger. Do not put brakes on your hunger, because that's what leads you to stuff. I mean, willing or not willing. And I never set out, we never set out to, you know, okay, this is going to be our career. No, I would be stupid to say that. That's something that we never had intention to do, yet this is what we found ourselves doing, and we love it. And there are some ways, which is, you know, just keep that spirit, that original spirit, that curiosity, that, you know, stuff that keeps you from sleeping at night. that's what keeps you going.
You touched on two keywords that are important to me, and it's my advice that I give young people and established people who find themselves in a rut. Because a lot of us are looking for passion, right? And passion's important because that drives us. And some people look for one passion. I look for many. But I always say, when you're out of that passion, right, you're not connected to a passion, and it's understandable, it comes and goes. But the key is curiosity.
Yeah, man.
Curiosity will lead you to your passions, right? And that, you know, that's one of the things that graffiti has taught me, is the curiosity. I was passionate about it, but I was like, well, this is an applied art. Let's apply it on everything, right? And anything new that comes up, any technology, whatever it might be, and even in critical thinking, how do we apply that to the conversation, right?
Oh,
And you guys do that. So before we sign off, my final question: when was the last time you painted a train?
Oh, dude, that was like, my mom's watching this. It was 1 week ago. So yeah, there you go.
Not to put you on the spot, but I want to keep it real.
I know. Let's keep it real. Let's keep it real. And I want to add one thing to what you were just saying before that. You want to try everything on whatever medium and whatnot. 90% of that is going to be shit. You have to, you know, choose what works best and whatnot. You know, it's trial and error, and you never got to be sick, because of course applying it to every medium is fun, but a lot of that is just going to be for the sake of its own self. I don't think my train for last week is going to bring me any work.
Right. No, I've had great luck. I think I've had great luck in that way. I have to say, I have very good fortune that way. But yeah, you need a focused mind. So listen, I want to thank you and your crew for sharing the story with us here at the Museum of Graffiti. I think we learned a lot. I think the conversation about one, European graffiti development, and especially Italy, but also in how writers, as we age and formalize our talents, right, and what we can do with it, right, and the diverse applications of this talent. And you guys illustrate that. And I was always fascinated when I first discovered you guys about the cohesiveness in your relationships, but also in your aims as a design studio.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I think we have to thank you, because, you know, apart from this conversation, which was brilliant, I think that it all goes way beyond what we ever had the intention of, you know, creating ourselves in our lives. It's all thanks to graffiti, and it's I don't know. I still am at loss of words to describe what Graph has inspired in my life, and it will still bring so much more. And we never get sick of doing it. You know, that's the main thing. That's crazy. I mean, that's crazy. It's an obsession.
Listen, you have 60-plus-year-old writers still, so
I know, man.
it's in the system, you know, we're lifers, you know, and so that said, you know, for guys like me, when I see a younger generation like yourselves carrying the torch, and then of course, God knows how many you guys have inspired. We lay securely in what we often say, that this is probably the world's largest art movement ever created.
No doubt.
And led by children.
No doubt.
So that will continue for us. And, you know, with those parting words, again, on behalf of the museum and all our staff here who make it possible, you know, thank you guys again. And hopefully we'll see each other in Italy or in Miami. If you guys make it out to Miami, come visit us.
Dude, I hope this pandemic is over sometime soon, and we're going to go back. We're going to come back in Miami as soon as possible. And, you know, we got plenty of walls here in Torino. Need not ask.
I'm a sculptor, so you know, we'll have to figure something out.
There's stuff that can be done here. You know, public art here has, you know, a lot of centuries of history. There's a lot of stuff that can be done.
Bene, bene, bene. All right, my brother. Ciao for now.
Grazie, Carlos. Ciao.